Oasis did not return quietly. When Liam Gallagher and Noel Gallagher walked back onto a stage together in 2025, the reaction was bigger than a reunion. Stadiums filled. Crowds traveled across countries. People who had grown up with the band stood beside listeners who had discovered the songs years after Oasis had disappeared. For 16 years, there had been no Oasis concerts. Yet the songs had never really left. To understand why the return mattered so much, the story has to go back to Manchester, long before the stadium lights. Noel Gallagher was born in Manchester in 1967. Liam followed in 1972. They grew up in a working-class Irish family in Burnage, surrounded by red brick streets, football culture and a city already famous for music. Manchester had produced generations of important bands, yet global rock stardom still belonged to another world. Nothing around the Gallagher brothers suggested that one day enormous crowds would sing their songs together. The first version of the band did not begin with Noel. Liam was singing with Paul Arthurs, known as Bonehead, Paul McGuigan, known as Giggsy, and drummer Tony McCarroll. The group had grown out of an earlier band called The Rain. Liam had the voice, the attitude and the instinct to stand at the front. Noel returned from working around the touring world with Inspiral Carpets and saw what his younger brother was doing. He joined with songs, ambition and a clear idea that the band should aim much higher. Liam already had the stage. Noel arrived with the map. That combination became the center of Oasis. Noel was the principal songwriter and creative architect. Liam gave the songs an instantly recognizable voice, while the band made the music sound larger than the rooms they were playing. They were not famous yet, but they behaved as if obscurity was temporary. In May 1993, Oasis played at King Tut's Wah Wah Hut in Glasgow. Alan McGee of Creation Records saw them perform, and the meeting helped open the door to a record deal. It was not a fairy tale in which one lucky night created a career from nothing. The songs, the rehearsals, the attitude and the work were already there. What changed was access. Oasis finally had a path from small rooms to a national audience. Their first single, Supersonic, arrived in 1994. More songs followed, including Live Forever, and then, in August, came the debut album Definitely Maybe. It entered the British album chart at number 1. But the most important thing about the record was the feeling. Definitely Maybe was full of escape, confidence, frustration, pleasure and possibility. It sounded like music made by young men who were tired of being told how small their lives were supposed to be. The guitars were loud, the melodies direct, the choruses memorable. There was swagger, but underneath it was aspiration. Oasis made ambition sound natural. For listeners who recognized something of themselves in those ordinary beginnings, the rise of the band suggested that where you started did not have to decide where you could finish. Then everything accelerated. In April 1995, some might say became Oasis's first #1 single in Britain. Around the same time, Tony McCarroll left and Alan White became the drummer. The band was already changing while its audience was growing. That summer, the British press turned Britpop into a national spectacle. Oasis and Blur released competing singles in the same week, and newspapers treated the chart as if it were a sporting final. Blur won that particular chart battle. But the larger story was moving somewhere else. Oasis was becoming too big to be explained by one rivalry. In October 1995, the band released What's the Story Morning Glory. The album expanded everything. The melodies, the emotions, the scale of the crowds and the reach of the songs. Wonderwall, Don't Look Back in Anger and Champagne Supernova became more than successful tracks. They became shared language. This was where the Oasis formula became especially powerful. Noel often wrote melodies and chord progressions that were easy to remember without feeling emotionally empty. Liam delivered them with a voice that carried defiance even when the song itself was vulnerable. His stage presence was equally distinctive. Chin raised, body almost still, hands often behind his back, leaning into a microphone as if he had no need to chase attention. The contrast mattered. Noel built much of the musical architecture. Liam made much of it unmistakably Oasis. The guitars added width and weight, but the real transformation happened when the audience joined in. A song that one person could hear alone in a bedroom could become something 50,000 people shouted together. Oasis concerts increasingly felt less like performances delivered to a crowd and more like mass participation. The audience was no longer simply watching the band. It was becoming part of the sound. By 1996, the scale had become extraordinary. Oasis played huge shows at Main Road in Manchester and at Loch Lomond in Scotland. Then came Knebworth. On the 10th and 11th of August, around 250,000 people attended across 2 nights. The distance from the band's early rehearsal rooms to that enormous field was only a few years, but visually it looked like another lifetime. The dream had expanded until the crowd reached the horizon. Knebworth became a symbol of the peak, but peaks create their own problems. Once a band has reached that size, every next move arrives under pressure. In 1997, Be Here Now was released into enormous expectation. Oasis was no longer just part of a music scene. The band had become part of the wider image of 1990s Britain. Media attention, fame and internal tension grew around the music. Britpop's cultural moment began to fade, but Oasis did not vanish with it. This is an important part of the story. The band continued making albums, touring and reaching audiences around the world. At the end of the 1990s, Bonehead and Giggsy left. Jem Archer and Andy Bell became important members of a new version of Oasis. Standing on the Shoulder of Giants arrived in 2000, followed by Heathen Chemistry, Don't Believe the Truth and, finally, Dig Out Your Soul in 2008. The sound evolved and the lineup changed, yet Oasis kept filling large venues. The phenomenon had survived the era that first created it. The group was no longer only a Britpop symbol. It had become an international rock institution. But one problem never disappeared. The creative partnership at the center of Oasis was also the relationship that repeatedly threatened its stability. Liam and Noel were brothers before they were bandmates. Their personalities were very different. Liam's instinct, confrontation and frontman energy could collide with Noel's need for control and creative direction. The tension had existed long before the biggest concerts. Fame only gave it a larger stage. By the final years, the relationship was becoming harder to sustain. Dig Out Your Soul was followed by another major tour, but on the 28th of August 2009, Oasis was scheduled to perform at the Rock en Seine Festival near Paris and never went on stage. After a serious backstage confrontation, Noel announced that he was leaving the band and could no longer continue working with Liam. After nearly 2 decades, Oasis was over. The image that followed was the opposite of Knebworth. No enormous field. No chorus rolling across a crowd. Just absence. Liam continued with Beady Eye and later built a solo career. Noel formed Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds. Both brothers kept making music. They were moving on separate roads, but one question followed them everywhere: would Oasis ever return? Years passed. The answer remained no. Yet Oasis survived without Oasis. The records stayed in circulation. The songs moved through streaming platforms, pubs, football culture and family collections. Teenagers who had not been alive during the band's rise learned the choruses. Listeners connected the music to friendships, relationships and memories of people they loved. The songs had stopped belonging only to the history of the band. They had become part of the lives lived around them. That was why the absence could last for 16 years without turning Oasis into a closed chapter. The musicians were apart, but the culture around the music kept growing. Then, in August 2024, the impossible announcement arrived. Oasis would return in 2025. Demand was enormous. For millions of listeners, it meant hearing a shared part of their own lives become physical again. On the 4th of July 2025, Oasis returned to the stage in Cardiff. The tour moved through Manchester, London, Edinburgh and Dublin, then across North America, Mexico, South Korea, Japan, Australia and South America. Older fans arrived with decades of memories. Younger fans arrived to see a band they had inherited rather than experienced the first time. And once again, the crowd became the third protagonist. Liam stood at the microphone, older but immediately recognizable. Noel stood with his guitar, no longer the young songwriter who had joined his brother's small Manchester band. Around them were stadiums full of people proving that the connection had survived the silence. The most powerful image was not simply Liam and Noel together again. It was the distance between two moments. In 1996, two young brothers looked across a sea of people at Knebworth. Nearly 3 decades later, older versions of those brothers faced enormous audiences around the world. The faces in the crowd had changed. The technology had changed. A generation had grown older, and another had arrived. But the communal act was the same. Oasis wanted to be enormous, and they succeeded. But sales, chart positions and stadiums do not completely explain why the band still matters. Their deeper achievement was turning personal ambition into collective memory. Songs created in Manchester became attached to millions of lives far beyond Manchester. The brothers could separate. The lineup could change. An era could end. Even Oasis itself could disappear for 16 years. But once the songs became part of other people's memories, the band no longer controlled how long the story would last. Oasis had wanted to live forever. In a way no chart could measure, the audience made sure the music did.